There are players that don't live up to expectations every single week, but why, in week 13, with fantasy playoff spots on the line, do we have multiple big-name players scoring fewer than 5 fantasy points? To make matters worse, some of these guys were just doing cardio out there, scoring 0 fantasy points. I'm Jorden Hill, and I'm just as frustrated as you are. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of these players that were underwhelming in Week 13 and could have some cause for concern going forward. We'll dive right in, but first, please be sure to leave a like on the video and drop a comment down below with the names of any players that have you panicking. Let's start things off at the quarterback position with Justin Herbert. Herbert got off to a really hot start this season, but he struggled over the past 2 weeks and was unable to find the end zone at all against New England on Sunday. The Chargers have lost 3 of their last 4, and beating the 2-10 Patriots 6-0 really can't feel that great. Herbert isn't the one to blame for all of LA's problems, but how much can we really rely on him for fantasy with Quentin Johnston constantly dropping passes and Austin Ekeler having the worst stretch of his career right now? I spoke about Ekeler last week, and while I do think he should improve with a soft upcoming schedule, it's hard to have a lot of confidence in him right now. The same can be said for Herbert, as I don't think he's an absolute must-start QB the rest of the way, but he should see somewhat of a return to form against the Broncos this week. The first running back we'll discuss is Devin Singletary. Singletary was looking like a league winner in weeks 10 and 11 with Dameon Pierce inactive, but he's starting to take a backseat to Pierce on the ground. He should remain the primary pass-catching back, but Singletary only saw 1 target this past week while totaling 40 yards. I would hold on to Singletary if you can. I think it's possible that the touches swing back in his favor if Pierce continues to run inefficiently, but I'd definitely keep him on my bench until we see that happen. Let's move on to DeAndre Swift. Before taking a hard hit late in the fourth quarter, Swift was only given 6 carries as the Eagles really struggled to run against a stingy 49ers defensive front. He did see 6 targets, but only managed 2 receptions for 7 yards, and this now makes 2 consecutive weeks of Swift finishing outside of the top 24 fantasy running backs. Assuming Swift didn't get seriously injured, I don't think there's any reason to panic here, but I will say that he's a player that you might want to bench on Sunday night when the Eagles take on the Cowboys in Dallas. Philly still does have a really good offense, which gives Swift a chance to score, but Dallas has been incredibly stout against the run, so if you have other decent options, I would at least consider them. In what seemed to be a favorable matchup on paper, Hollywood Brown gave fantasy managers absolutely nothing in Week 13, as he finished with 0 receptions on 3 targets. Now, it's possible that he just wasn't 100% as he entered the game with a heel injury and eventually exited in the third quarter, but he hasn't done much at all since Kyler Murray's return back in Week 10. If you can afford to hang on to him through a Week 14 bye, I would not drop Brown. He just saw 12 targets in Week 12, and Arizona has an awesome schedule for wide receivers in the fantasy playoffs. It'll be important to monitor his health over the next 2 weeks, but he should re-enter flex or wide receiver 3 territory as early as Week 15. Next up, we have Terry McLaurin. McLaurin has had a bit of a down season in general, but things have gotten especially rough recently as he hasn't eclipsed double-digit fantasy points since Week 8, and he failed to catch any of his 3 targets in Week 13. Like Brown, McLaurin will go on bye in Week 14, but he'll return to tough matchups against the Rams and Jets for the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. McLaurin does still lead the Commanders in targets, but on a weekly basis, it feels like Sam Howell's go-to guy could fluctuate between him, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, and even Logan Thomas. I doubt there's anyone on waiver wires worth dropping McLaurin for, but I could understand doing so if you have a need. Either way, I don't think you can trust him as anything more than a flex option in Week 15. And finally, we have Josh Downs. The rookie was coming off of a 13-target game and had an excellent matchup against the Titans, but was outshined by Michael Pittman, who was the clear number 1 target for Gardner Minshew. After this showing, Downs has a total of 16.2 combined half PPR points over his past 4 outings. I still believe Downs has a promising future, but his schedule to end the season isn't all that enticing, and he's just not someone you can depend on at the moment. That being said, I think you can safely move on. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please remember to subscribe to RotoBaller for the best fantasy football analysis that'll help you win big in 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in, and best of luck in Week 14.